It was at their dinner table, the polished mahogany reflecting the crystal, that the text message arrived. My phone vibrated against my thigh, a silent tremor beneath the tablecloth, cutting through the carefully constructed piece. Get up and go. Don't say anything to your son. An unknown number, a raw, imperative command. I felt it, a cold dread coiling in my gut before my mind could even process the words. 30 minutes later, the Montclair police were at their door, and I knew I had stumbled back into a hell I thought I'd escaped. The truth, when it came, stripped away every layer of illusion I had built around my son. My hands, scarred by years of honest work, felt the familiar grip of Margaret's coffee mug. Dish soap bubbles clung to my skin like faint memories, a ritual I repeated every evening. 3 times this week, the same mug, the same quiet act. It was the routine of a man living alone, a solitary echo in a house that once hummed with life. A single plate, a single fork, a single cup. Each object is a monument to another meal eaten in silence. The kitchen, once the heart of our home, now felt cavernous, empty without Margaret's quiet humming as she cooked, without her gentle, chiding voice reminding me about scattered newspapers. I dried the mug slowly, deliberately, placing it in its accustomed spot on the rack. It was less a place for dishes, more a shrine to better times, to a life I thought was simply paused, not irrevocably broken. The refrigerator hummed its lonely song, a quiet backdrop to faded photographs held by mismatched magnets. My gaze settled on Rick, 17, grinning in his cap and gown at high school graduation. Margaret's arm was around his shoulders, her smile full of pride. It was a fragment of a past that now felt like a different lifetime, a different family. Before the arguments, before the money, before the silence that had swallowed us whole. The phone's shrill ring cut through my reverie like a surgeon's blade, a sudden, brutal intrusion. My wet hands fumbled for the dish towel, the insistent demand of the ringing echoing in the quiet house. The wall-mounted receiver felt cold, clinical, against my palm as I lifted it. My reading glasses perched precariously. I squinted at the caller ID. Rick. My breath caught, trapped somewhere in my throat. A year of silence, a vast, bitter ocean stretched between us. For a moment, I was a statue, frozen in the dim kitchen light. The last words we'd exchanged had been flung like stones a year ago. He'd stormed out, leaving a gaping wound in our relationship after I refused to loan him money for another one of his investment opportunities. Margaret. She would have known the words to smooth things over, to bridge the chasm. Her absence was a constant, aching counterpoint to my own bluntness. Hello? My voice rasped, rougher than I intended, an old man's greeting to a ghost. Dad. His voice. It carried that same uncertain tremor from his childhood, the one he'd used when he'd broken a valuable vase and knew he was in deep trouble. It's me. I gripped the phone tighter, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Rick, I wasn't expecting— I know it's been— He paused, and I could hear his breath, shallow, uncertain, through the phone. Too long. Way too long. I moved slowly, drawn by an invisible thread, to my armchair. Margaret had insisted on it, a pragmatic woman always thinking of my back. The leather was worn smooth, a testament to years of evening news and Sunday crosswords, silent witness to a life lived. How are you, son? A simple question, weighted with a year of unspoken longing. I'm good. Really good. Emma and I, he continued, his voice picking up a cautious warmth, we've been talking, and we realized how much we miss having you around. How much we miss— Family. The word hung suspended between us, fragile, almost alien. Family. It was a concept we'd once embodied, before pride, money, and stubborn silence had built impenetrable walls. I miss it too, I confessed, surprised by the raw honesty that escaped my own lips. It was a truth I hadn't dared to voice, even to myself. Dad, would you consider coming for dinner tonight? Emma's making that pot roast you always loved. We could talk. Really talk. Like we used to. My eyes drifted to the family photo on the side table, a sepia-toned memory of their wedding 5 years ago. Rick, Emma, Margaret, and I. Before everything went wrong. Margaret's words echoed in my mind, a comforting mantra. Families find their way back to each other, given time. Tonight? My voice wavered, betraying the sheer surprise that flooded me. I know it's short notice, he pressed, urgency creeping into his tone. But Emma's already started cooking, and we don't want to wait anymore. We've wasted enough time. Something in his voice, a raw vulnerability, tugged at a forgotten corner of my heart. It was the same tremor I remembered from when he was a small boy, afraid of thunderstorms, seeking my protection. Perhaps Margaret had been right all along. Perhaps families, even broken ones, truly could heal. Perhaps this was our chance. What time? The words left my lips before I consciously formed them. 7:30. I'll text you the address. We moved to Montclair last year. Montclair, expensive territory, a zip code whispered with reverence in real estate circles. Rick had always been ambitious, driven. I'll be there, I affirmed, the decision solidified. His voice softened then, a genuine relief in its tone. Thank you for giving us another chance. After I hung up, the silence returned, but this time it was different. I sat at my desk, the family photo trembling slightly in my hands, a fragile artifact of a past I desperately wanted to reclaim. Marge grated a sick up at me from the frame, a ghost of her gentle presence. I could almost hear her whisper, "It's time, Jonathan. It's time to come home." The silence that settled after the dial tone felt charged, electric, brimming with possibility instead of the usual emptiness. I placed the family photo back on the side table, carefully, reverently. I rose from my chair, a purpose blossoming within me, a sense of direction I hadn't felt in months. Tonight would not be like the lonely nights before. Tonight would be different. Tonight, I would reclaim my son. Upstairs, my bedroom felt less like a living space and more like a museum of memories, each object a carefully preserved artifact. Margaret's perfume bottles still lined her dresser, catching the late afternoon light that filtered through lace curtains, illuminating dust motes dancing like tiny spirits. I opened my closet, pushing past the utilitarian everyday shirts and worn sweaters until my fingers found the navy suit. It hung in its protective plastic, waiting. The fabric, a substantial wool blend, felt cool and solid beneath my fingers. Margaret had insisted on it, a surprise gift for Rick's graduation. "You need something nice for important occasions," she'd declared, her careful hands smoothing the lapels, her eyes twinkling. "And our son graduating is definitely important." I carried the suit to the bed, unwrapping it slowly, each fold revealing a memory. I remembered the surge of pride, walking into that auditorium, Margaret's arm linked through mine, watching Rick cross the stage. It wasn't just my pride, it was ours. That same suit had witnessed every milestone of my adult life. Tense job interviews, joyous anniversaries, the crushing grief of Margaret's funeral. Tonight, it would mark another. The shower's hot water, a welcome balm, loosened muscles I hadn't realized were locked in a perpetual state of tension. As I shaved, my reflection stared back, a hopeful stranger in the mirror. His eyes, though tired, held a flicker of the man I used to be. When had the years etched such deep lines around my eyes? Silver now dominated my temples, a stark contrast to the dark hair of the man in the graduation photo. Would Rick notice the changes, the subtle signs of loneliness? Would Emma see the quiet erosion of my spirit? Margaret's cologne, Chanel No. 5, her annual Christmas indulgence, still sat on the bathroom counter, exactly where I'd left it after her passing. I touched the bottle briefly, a silent communion, before reaching for my own aftershave. Some memories were too sacred, too fragile to borrow from. They deserved their own space, untainted by the present. Dressed and ready, I surveyed my reflection one final time. The suit still fit, though perhaps a bit looser, a testament to the quiet meals. I selected a bottle of aged whiskey from the cabinet, a peace offering, chosen with care. It was more than a gift. It was a silent prayer, a liquid bridge to span the chasm of past hurts and future hopes. My phone buzzed then, a text from Rick. 247 Elmwood Drive, Montclair. Can't wait to see you, Dad. The address, a cold, hard fact, and the sentiment, a fragile hope. I called for an Uber, my fingers hesitating, trembling slightly as I typed the Montclair address. Montclair, a world away, a 40-minute journey from my modest Brooklyn brownstone. The app estimated an 8-minute wait. Standing by my front window, I watched familiar brownstones blur into the deepening evening shadows. Mrs. Chen from next door waved from her stoop, her familiar gesture a comfort. I waved back, a faint smile touching my lips. I felt lighter, a fragile buoyancy I hadn't experienced in months, the weight of a year lifting, if only for a moment. Maybe tonight would rewrite our story. Maybe family really could find its way home. The Uber arrived precisely on time. A clean sedan, the driver offering a cheerful comment about the weather, oblivious to the momentous journey he was facilitating. As we pulled away from the curb, Brooklyn's familiar brick and concrete gradually gave way to the sprawling arteries of highways. Then, the manicured landscapes of suburbs, each mile a visual transformation of the world outside my window. The houses grew larger, sprawling monuments to wealth. Lawns were pristine, unnaturally green. Driveways wider, curving in perfect arcs. By the time we crossed into New Jersey, I was staring at mansions that could have easily housed 6 families like mine, their silent grandeur oppressive. "Montclair's a beautiful area," the driver remarked, his voice cheerful, noting my wide-eyed observation. "A lot of successful folks out here." "I'm visiting my son," I replied, a surge of paternal pride momentarily eclipsing the confusion coiling in my gut. How could Rick afford such a luxury? Lucky man, having family in a place like this. Lucky indeed, I thought, the driver's words echoing my own burgeoning unease. How exactly had Rick, who'd needed a loan a year ago, managed to acquire a house in one of New Jersey's most exclusive zip codes? The question, unbidden, hung in the air. The Uber slowed, finally stopping before a house that belonged not in a neighborhood, but in the glossy pages of an architectural magazine, a testament to unattainable dreams. I sat frozen, a silent witness in the back seat, staring up at towering stone columns and perfectly manicured topiaries, each sculpted bush probably costing more than my monthly rent. A circular driveway curved around an ornate fountain, water dancing, catching the last of the evening light. Two luxury cars, a Mercedes and a BMW, sat parked, gleaming statements of success, of a life I could barely comprehend. "This is it, sir," the driver announced cheerfully, pulling me from my stupor. "Beautiful place." I fumbled with my wallet, my hands trembling slightly as I counted out bills, adding a generous tip, a small act of gratitude for the journey. "Thank you. Have a good evening." The car door felt impossibly heavy as I stepped onto the pristine pavement. My shoes, polished for the occasion but clearly worn, clicked against the stone as I walked the curved path toward an entrance that resembled a small, exclusive hotel. Each step felt like a betrayal of my humble origins. Perfectly trimmed hedges lined the walkway, each leaf meticulously placed. Motion sensor lights, theatrical in their precision, illuminated my approach, making me feel like an actor on a stage. Before my hand could even reach for the gleaming brass doorbell, the massive oak door swung open, as if on cue. A middle-aged Hispanic woman stood in the doorway. Her kind eyes, framed by graying hair, met mine. She wore a crisp black dress that subtly, yet unmistakably announced, "Professional housekeeper." Her smile seemed genuine, a practiced warmth, yet something flickered behind her eyes, a fleeting shadow, a micro-expression I interpreted as concern, warning. It vanished so quickly, I wondered if I'd merely imagined it, a trick of the unfamiliar light. "Mr. Miller," she said warmly, her voice soft, stepping aside to usher me into a foyer so vast it made my entire Brooklyn living room seem like a mere closet. "I'm Maria. Mr. Rick and Miss Emma are so excited you're here." The sheer scale of the interior took my breath away. A silent gasp caught in my throat. Marble floors stretched endlessly, gleaming like a frozen river, leading toward a curved staircase that belonged in the grandest of cinematic depictions of wealth. Crystal chandeliers dripped warm light over oil paintings that looked undeniably original, undeniably expensive. The air, thick with the subtle perfume of fresh flowers, real ones, not the artificial arrangements I typically favored, felt heavy with opulence. Then, a voice, deep and resonant, boomed from somewhere deeper within the house. "Dad!" Rick's voice, booming with an unfamiliar confidence, echoed through the grand space as his footsteps approached. He appeared in the foyer, a vision plucked from a magazine. An expensive suit, a perfect haircut, teeth unnaturally white, certainly not the smile he'd worn at his graduation. When he reached me, his embrace felt desperate, clutching, lasting a beat too long, more a plea than a greeting. "You look great," he declared, stepping back, his eyes studying me with a peculiar mix of forced gratitude and underlying anxiety. "Really great." Emma materialized beside him, a graceful apparition in a silk dress that likely cost more than my entire car. Her makeup was flawless, a carefully constructed mask. Her jewelry is subtle, understated, but radiates undeniable expense. Her smile was so perfect, so practiced, it felt rehearsed, a performance. "Jonathan," she purred, sweeping forward to kiss my cheek, enveloping me in a cloud of expensive perfume. "You look wonderful. We're so happy you're here." I managed a weak smile, still overwhelmed, almost suffocated by the sheer opulence surrounding us. "This place is incredible. How do you—" I started my question about his business already forming. Rick interrupted quickly, a laugh too bright, too forced. "Real estate. Caught the market at exactly the right time. Lucky timing, mostly." Something in his tone, a slight deflection, made me pause, a tiny ripple of unease in the grand facade. But Emma was already there, taking my arm with practiced grace, steering me forward. "Come, let's get you settled. Maria, could you take Mr. Miller's coat?" I handed over my jacket, my best one, feeling suddenly shabby, incongruous in these surroundings. Maria accepted it with another of those kind, yet troubled smiles, before disappearing toward what I assumed was a coat closet, a space large enough to house a small family. "I brought this," I announced, offering the whiskey bottle I'd selected with such care, a symbol of reconciliation. "Thought we could share a drink." Rick's face lit up, a genuine, if fleeting, flicker of pleasure as he examined the label. "Dad, this is fantastic." "You shouldn't have, but I'm glad you did." He clapped my shoulder with an enthusiasm that felt slightly forced, a performance. "Emma's been cooking all afternoon. She remembered how much you love pot roast." Pot roast, my favorite. But how did Emma remember? We had shared perhaps 3 meals together in 5 years. I couldn't recall pot roast ever being a topic of conversation. A small, cold sliver of doubt began to form, a discordant note in the symphony of reunion. But her smile was so warm, so welcoming, that I pushed the intrusive thought aside. "You're too kind," I told her, and in that moment I meant it, despite the lingering confusion. "Family takes care of family," she replied smoothly, linking her arm through mine, her touch possessive. "That's what matters most." The words, so familiar, so comforting, almost drowned out the tiny alarm bell ringing in my mind. Rick led us toward what I assumed was the dining room, his stride confident, but something tight, almost desperate around his eyes. Maria had vanished, dissolving silently into the house's depths, leaving us in this perfect tableau of family reunion. As we walked through rooms that belonged in the glossy pages of decorating magazines, each step felt heavy with the effort of reconciling this blatant, almost offensive wealth with the son who had, just a year ago, been desperate enough to ask me for money. The dining room opened before us, a meticulously staged set from a period drama. A mahogany table, set for 4, gleamed under the soft light of an overhead crystal chandelier. China, delicate and expensive, caught the light, reflecting tiny galaxies. Silver gleamed against starched white linen. The rich, comforting scent of cooking pot roast drifted from somewhere beyond the swinging doors, doors that likely led to a kitchen larger than my entire Brooklyn apartment. Every detail screamed wealth, meticulously curated, almost intimidating. "This is beautiful," I breathed, a genuine, unbidden compliment escaping my lips. Emma beamed, soaking in the praise. "We want tonight to be special. We want to start over, Jonathan. All of us." Rick pulled out my chair at the head of the table, a practiced ease in his movements, the gesture of someone accustomed to formal dining. In that moment, a quiet prayer formed in my heart. I found myself hoping Margaret could see this, that her boy had finally made something of himself, found success beyond our modest dreams. Maybe, just maybe, she would be proud of how he'd turned out. Maybe she'd approve of this chance at reconciliation, this fragile olive branch I was about to grasp. The dining room, in its overwhelming perfection, welcomed us like a scene meticulously curated from a luxury lifestyle magazine. Crystal glasses, delicate and expensive, caught the chandelier's warm light, casting tiny rainbows across starched white linens. Silver gleamed, almost blindingly, against bone china that probably cost more than my monthly rent. It was all so meticulously perfect that it felt hyper-real. Each place setting was an artwork, a miniature display of precision. Multiple forks, arranged with military exactitude. Cloth napkins, folded into perfect, untouchable peaks. "This is incredible," I breathed, running my fingers along the mahogany table's polished edge, feeling the cool, smooth wood. Rick beamed, a proud architect of this illusion, as he pulled out my chair at the head of the table. A king welcoming his patriarch. "Only the best for family reunions, right, Dad?" Rick's voice was light, but his eyes held an unnerving intensity. Emma settled gracefully to my left, a vision of composure, while Rick claimed the seat to my right. The arrangement felt deliberate, strategic. Both of them are positioned to observe my every reaction, to subtly guide every conversation. Maria appeared silently then, gliding from what I assumed was the kitchen, carrying delicate appetizers arranged like tiny, edible sculptures. "Let's start with your whiskey," Rick announced, already uncorking the bottle I had brought, eager, almost too eager. The amber liquid caught the chandelier's light, swirling like liquid gold as he poured generous, almost excessive portions into heavy crystal tumblers. "This calls for a proper toast." He handed me a glass, filled higher than I would have ever poured for myself. The whiskey's warmth began to spread through my chest, a pleasant burn as Emma raised her wine glass with theatrical grace, her movements practiced, precise. "To family," she declared, her smile radiant, a beacon of engineered warmth. "To forgiveness and fresh starts." "To Margaret," Rick added, his voice catching slightly, a manufactured tremor that nevertheless tugged at me. She would have wanted us together like this. The whiskey burned sweetly, a pleasant heat spreading through my veins as we drank. Margaret always said alcohol loosened tongues and hearts in equal measure. Tonight, surrounded by such blatant, almost offensive prosperity, I couldn't help but wonder what she, with her pragmatic wisdom, would truly think of this opulent display. Her silent judgment, I imagined, would be sharp. "Tell us about the restaurants." Emma leaned forward, her expression one of genuine seeming interest. "Rick says you built an empire from nothing." "Empire is too grand a word," I replied, taking another sip, feeling unusually relaxed, the whiskey working its subtle magic. "Just hard work and faith in people. Margaret always said, treat employees like family, customers like friends." It was a philosophy that had served me well, a simple truth in a complex world. "Don't be modest, Dad." Rick refilled my glass, his movements quick, almost furtive, before I had even registered it was empty. 7 locations now. That's impressive by any standard. 7. He'd been keeping track, even during our long, bitter silence. A warmth, unfamiliar and comforting, expanded in my chest. Maybe he had cared more than I had realized. Maybe this was truly a fresh start, not just a performance. Maria served the soup course, her practiced efficiency a stark contrast to the slight tremor I noticed in her hands as she placed the delicate porcelain bowl of rich lobster bisque before me. Another reminder of the chasm between this opulent dining room and my modest Brooklyn kitchen. "Do you ever think about retirement?" Emma asked casually, cutting her bread with surgical precision, her tone almost too nonchalant. "Slowing down a bit?" "The restaurants keep me busy," I replied, finding myself drinking more freely than usual. The combination of good company and fine alcohol loosening inhibitions I'd maintained for months. It's what Margaret and I built together. A lifetime of shared dreams and honest labor. Every single location, every brick and beam had her fingerprints on it. Rick and Emma exchanged a quick, knowing glance. I pretended not to notice, but the observation stuck. They seemed to communicate without words, a silent language developed between couples after years together, a shorthand of shared intent. Emma's hand found mine briefly, her fingers cool, almost calculating against my skin. "But you can't work forever," Rick pressed gently, his voice soft, persuasive. "Have you thought about succession planning? Legal arrangements for the future?" The question felt oddly specific, a sudden shift from casual conversation to pointed inquiry. But the alcohol, now a warm blanket around my thoughts, made everything seem harmless, merely practical. "One day at a time, son. One day at a time." Maria appeared with the main course, the pot roast. It smelled exactly like Margaret's recipe, a scent that transported me back decades. How had Emma known? The question, once pushed aside, resurfaced with a sharp edge. We'd shared so few meals over the years. "This is perfect," I told her truthfully, genuinely moved by the taste. "Exactly like my wife used to make." Emma's smile looked painted on, a fragile facade. "I wanted tonight to be special, to remind you that family takes care of family." The phrase, now repeated, carried a hollow echo. As we ate, Rick regaled me with stories about his real estate ventures, though his explanations remained frustratingly vague, lacking the concrete details of true success. Emma, on the other hand, asked pointed questions, sharp and incisive, about restaurant operations, profit margins, and property values. Their curiosity felt intense, almost predatory, like seasoned professionals dissecting a business proposal. The room grew warmer, the air thick with the scent of food and unspoken questions as the evening progressed, and my discomfort grew. My head felt lighter, fuzzier than it should have after just 2 glasses of whiskey. Rich food, good company, and the relief of reconciliation, I told myself, a desperate internal reassurance. Nothing more than that. But then Rick checked his watch, a quick, almost imperceptible glance he thought I missed. And Emma. She monitored my consumption like a vigilant bartender, tracking a regular customer, noting every sip, every lowered glass. The subtle coordination, the hidden observations, began to coalesce into a pattern. Maria moved between the kitchen and dining room with a nervous efficiency, a silent dance of anxiety. She dropped a fork that clattered, a sharp sound echoing against the marble floors, breaking the artificial calm. Something, a faint disquiet, nagged at the edge of my consciousness. But the whiskey, now a heavy fog, made thinking difficult, made clarity impossible. Everything felt slightly surreal, as if I were watching myself from outside my own body. An actor in a play I didn't understand. When had I become such a lightweight? My hand instinctively reached into my jacket pocket for my phone, a small, familiar comfort. My phone vibrated against my palm, a sudden, jarring tremor, just as I started to pull it out. The unexpected movement startled me mid-sentence. "Sorry," I mumbled, glancing apologetically at Rick and Emma, forcing a casual air. Probably just the night manager with some routine question. But the number on my screen belonged to no one I recognized. A local area code, yes, but completely foreign digits, a sequence I'd never seen before. I frowned, my thumb hovering over the notification, a premonition of something ominous. Restaurant emergencies, the ones I knew, always came from familiar numbers. Miguel from Park Slope, Sarah from Crown Heights, Tony from our newest venture in Queens. This was none of them. The phone buzzed again, more insistently this time, a persistent, silent alarm. "Everything all right?" Rick asked, leaning forward, his voice dripping with what felt like excessive concern, a performance dialed up a notch. "Just an unfamiliar number," I lied, shielding the screen partially with my napkin, driven by an instinct I couldn't explain, a primal urge to conceal. The text message appeared then, stark, bold, in capital letters. "Stand up and leave. Now say nothing to your son." My blood turned to ice. The elegant dining room, with its crystal and polished mahogany, suddenly felt like it was tilting, a ship tossed on a turbulent sea. I couldn't tell if it was the sheer shock of the words or the whiskey, now a potent poison, making my head swim, blurring the edges of reality. I read the message again, certain, desperately certain I had misunderstood. But there it was, the same words, the same urgent, terrifying command. "Dad." Emma's voice seemed to come from a great distance, muffled, distorted. "You look pale. Are you feeling all right?" I forced my features into what I hoped resembled normalcy, slipping the phone back into my pocket with hands that trembled more than they should. "Fine," I managed, the lie catching in my throat. "Just rich food hitting me harder than expected." But I wasn't fine. Not at all. Someone unknown had my private number, knew exactly where I was, and felt compelled to warn me. About what? About Rick? About this perfect evening that had, in an instant, transformed into an elaborate, sinister stage production. The whiskey glass in my hand caught the chandelier light, the amber liquid swirling, a vortex of dread, as my fingers shook. Imperceptibly at first, then more violently. When had I become this dizzy, this disoriented? 2 glasses of whiskey, even on a full meal, should not affect me this strongly. This was not normal. "Maybe some water," Emma suggested smoothly, her voice a soothing balm, already signaling Maria with a subtle flick of her wrist. Rick studied my face with sharp, predatory attention. "You sure you're okay? You went completely white there for a second." "I'm sure." The lie, once difficult, now came easier than it should have. A survival mechanism kicking in. "Just need to... excuse me for a moment." "Bathroom?" Rick asked, his tone laced with a forced concern. "Of course." Rick pointed toward the hallway, a theatrical gesture. "Second door on the left. We'll wait for you. Maria's bringing dessert." I stood carefully, testing my balance. The room swayed slightly, a subtle shift, but I managed to walk normally toward the hallway, each step a deliberate act of defiance. Behind me, Rick and Emma's voices continued, low, concerned, weaving a new layer into their ongoing charade. The hallway stretched before me, a long corridor lined with expensive artwork and subtle, strategic lighting. The second door on the left led to what I assumed was a powder room. But instead of turning left, something, an urgent, primal instinct, compelled me to continue straight toward what looked like a kitchen entrance. The anonymous message burned in my memory, a searing brand. "Get up and go." Whoever sent it knew something I didn't, something terrible enough to risk everything. Someone felt I was in enough danger to risk their own exposure by warning a stranger. It was a staggering thought. Maria stood at an enormous sink, washing crystal glasses with methodical, almost ritualistic precision. Her back was turned toward me, but she didn't acknowledge my presence, even though my footsteps must have been audible, echoing softly on the marble floors. She continued her work, a silent sentinel, as if I were invisible. Just beyond her, the kitchen's back door stood slightly ajar, a narrow sliver of light revealing what looked like a garden, an escape route. Freedom, fresh air, space to think clearly, away from Rick and Emma's watchful, predatory eyes. I moved quietly past Maria, each step a deliberate act of stealth. I expected her to turn, to question my presence, to alert my hosts. She never looked up from her washing, but her shoulders tensed, a barely perceptible flicker of acknowledgement as I passed. The door opened silently, almost invitingly, onto a manicured lawn that rivaled any country club, a tableau of deceptive peace. Motion sensors, like silent sentinels, illuminated my path across the perfectly trimmed grass, a green carpet leading to a gate in the property's back fence. My phone felt heavy in my pocket, its mysterious warning a ticking bomb against my leg. Street lamps beyond the fence promised anonymity, distance from whatever unseen danger had prompted that urgent message. I walked faster, my dress shoes slipping slightly on the dewy grass. I no longer cared about stains, about appearances, only escape. The gate opened onto a quiet residential street, lined with more mansions, each one a fortress of wealth, probably housing millionaires and their myriad secrets. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers, opened my ride-sharing app, and requested a pickup 1 block away from Rick's address. 5 minutes until arrival. 5 minutes to decide if I was descending into paranoia or if I was truly protecting myself from something terrifyingly real. The line between sanity and suspicion blurred. The phone in my hand felt like a piece of evidence. Of conspiracy or paranoia, I couldn't yet tell which. But that message, those urgent capital letters, had triggered every survival instinct Margaret's practical wisdom had ever instilled in me. When someone warns you about danger, she'd always said, listen first and ask questions later. Her voice, calm and clear, echoed in my mind, a beacon in the suburban darkness. Uber's headlights appeared at the end of the block, cutting through the shadows like a lifeline, a tangible promise of safety. I climbed into the back seat, gave the driver my Brooklyn address, and immediately dialed the number that had shattered my evening. It rang twice, each tone a hammer blow, before a voice answered. Careful, anonymous, deliberately neutral. I hoped you would call this number. Who is this? My voice came out rougher than intended, a raw rasp. Why did you warn me? I cannot reveal myself, but you were in immediate danger tonight. That's impossible. I was having dinner with my son. A pause stretched long and chilling, like the silence before a death sentence. Then, the words, delivered with a detached clinicality. Your son owes $2.3 million to people who break bones when payment is late. The Uber driver glanced in his rearview mirror as we merged into traffic, probably wondering why his passenger had gone completely silent mid-conversation, as if struck by lightning. I gripped the phone tighter, the anonymous voice's words echoing in my head as hammer blows, each one shattering another piece of my carefully constructed reality. That's impossible, I repeated, though my voice lacked conviction, a desperate whisper. Rick owns real estate. He lives in a mansion. He borrowed against everything to fund gambling debts, the voice continued, calm, methodical, relentless. Underground casinos, high-stakes poker, sports betting with organized loan sharks. 2 weeks to pay or face serious physical consequences. My free hand instinctively found the door handle, a desperate, illogical impulse, as if I could escape this crushing information by simply fleeing the moving car. Through the window, the expensive Montclair neighborhoods blurred past, perfect lawns hiding imperfect, sinister secrets. Even if that were true, I said slowly, my voice thick with disbelief, what does it have to do with warning me away from dinner? The whiskey you brought contained zetrulum. It multiplies alcohol effects by a factor of 5, making you extremely susceptible to suggestion. The words hit me like a physical blow, a punch to the gut. The unusual dizziness, the way 2 glasses had affected me like 6, my increasing, uncharacteristic willingness to discuss business details I'd normally guard with my life. It all clicked into place, a sinister explanation for my altered state. I stopped, the horror of it dawning on me. Rick's eager insistence on opening my gift immediately. Emma's careful, almost clinical monitoring of my consumption. Their coordinated, seamless refilling of my glass before I'd even noticed it emptying. It was all a meticulously choreographed plan. Legal documents were prepared in advance, the voice continued, relentless, stripping away my last illusions. Complete transfer of your restaurant properties and business assets. Power of attorney, granting your son full, irrevocable control. The only missing element was your signature. The Uber driver, a paragon of professional detachment, kept his eyes on the road, expertly ignoring his passenger's obvious, shattering distress. I stared out at the suburban streets, which now looked suddenly sinister. Every well-lit window a potential frame for similar, hidden betrayals. "How do you know all this?" I whispered, the words barely audible. "That doesn't matter. What matters is that you escaped before signing anything. Zetramelium, combined with alcohol, can cause memory gaps, making it easy to claim you willingly transferred everything." My mind raced, replaying the evening with horrifying, sickening clarity. Rick's nervous energy, Emma's rehearsed warmth, their pointed, insistent questions about succession planning and retirement. Every word, every glance, now fit into a meticulously crafted narrative of deceit. The evening replayed in my memory, frame by horrifying frame, each detail imbued with a sinister new context. Every toast, every refilled glass, every strategic touch designed to lower my guard, to make me pliable. "My son wouldn't—" The protest died in my throat, a choked gasp. The boy who had once asked me to read him bedtime stories, the innocent child I cherished, had grown into a man desperate enough to drug his own father, to steal his legacy. The loan sharks gave him 2 weeks. That deadline is in 11 days. "Why are you helping me?" I asked, finally, the question, a desperate plea for understanding in the chaos. "Because what they planned was wrong. Because you deserve to know the truth about people you trust." The anonymous caller knew details no stranger should possess: precise debt amounts, the drug's name, and the specifics of the illegal documents. Someone with intimate access to Rick and Emma's twisted conspiracy. Who are you, really? Someone who sees more than people realize. Someone who couldn't stand by and watch an innocent man be destroyed by family greed. Maria. The realization hit me like a lightning strike, sharp and undeniable. Her nervous during dinner, the way she'd avoided eye contact, a silent plea. Her deliberate non-reaction when I'd passed through the kitchen. She knew. She had seen. And she had chosen conscience over employment, moral courage over complicity. She had known about the plan, about the drug, about the documents. And she had chosen conscience over employment security. "Thank you," I said quietly, the words thick with gratitude. "Don't thank me yet. They'll realize you're gone soon. Rick is desperate enough to try again, possibly with more dangerous methods." The Uber continued its steady journey toward Brooklyn, each mile increasing the physical distance between the son and me I thought I knew. A son now revealed as a stranger. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Rick, the screen a stark reminder of his mounting panic. He was probably wondering what was taking so long in the bathroom, already sensing something was wrong. "What should I do?" I asked, my voice raw. "Protect yourself. Change locks. Inform your lawyers. Move financial assets to accounts Rick can't access. He knows your business inside and out, every vulnerability. every routine. The driver caught my eye in the mirror. "We're about halfway to Brooklyn, sir. You doing all right back there?" I nodded, not trusting my voice, the words caught in my throat. Through the phone, I could hear the anonymous caller breathing, steady, calm, waiting for my next question. "Will you testify if this goes to court?" "I can't," she replied, her voice firm. "But the truth has a way of surfacing when people dig deep enough." 3 more missed calls appeared on my screen. Rick's panic, I knew, would be growing. Rick's panic would be escalating, bathroom minutes stretching into an obvious, undeniable absence. Soon he'd realize I had fled deliberately, not just for fresh air. And desperation, I knew, would make him dangerous. "Be very careful," the voice warned, a final, chilling note. "Desperate people make desperate choices. Your son has 11 days to find $2.3 million or face consequences worse than mere bankruptcy. Far worse." The call ended, leaving me alone with the Uber driver's soft jazz and the crushing weight of complete family destruction. In one brutal evening, I had gained a son and lost him again. I had learned the true price of trust and the devastating cost of my own naivety. My phone buzzed. A text from Rick. "Dad, where are you? We're worried sick." I stared at the message, its words hollow, then deleted it without responding. The pretense was over. The man who sent those words, my own son, had planned to drug me unconscious and steal everything Margaret and I had painstakingly built together. The Uber driver cleared his throat gently, breaking my reverie. "Sir, we're approaching the Brooklyn Bridge. Still want to go to the original address?" I looked out at the city lights reflecting off the dark water, then back at my phone, the route to Montclair still glowing in my GPS, a stark reminder of the crossroads I faced. Safety lay ahead, beckoning from the familiar skyline of Brooklyn, promising the comfort of my worn armchair, where Margaret's memory lived in every thread. But confrontation, raw and unavoidable, waited behind in New Jersey. For the first time in my life, I faced a choice that cut to the bone. Protecting myself, or protecting what remained, however fractured, of my family. Margaret's silent challenge hung in the air. What would she have done? But safety, now, felt like a hollow victory, a retreat into cowardice. Not knowing what Rick was capable of doing to me, but knowing what he was capable of doing to others. When desperation, that cold, sharp pang, threatened to paralyze me, I pulled Margaret's wedding photo from my wallet. Its edges were soft from years of handling, her smile as radiant, as unwavering, as the day we'd promised to build something meaningful together. She would never have backed down from a difficult conversation. She would never have chosen comfort over doing what was right. Not her. She wouldn't run, I whispered to her image, a silent vow. The driver caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "Everything all right back there, sir?" "Actually, no," I replied, my voice steady now, clarity cutting through the haze. I straightened in my seat, the decision crystallizing like steel in my chest, cold and hard. "I need to make a phone call. Then we're changing destination." My fingers, still trembling, dialed 911. There was no going back now. 2 rings, then a professional voice, calm and efficient. "Emergency services, what's your emergency?" "My family is attempting to poison me for money." The words sounded surreal, spoken aloud, alien, like lines from a television drama. "I have evidence, and they're still at the location with prepared legal documents." "Sir, are you in immediate danger?" "Not right now, but I need officers at 247 Elmwood Drive, Montclair, New Jersey. I'm returning there to gather evidence. The dispatcher's questions came rapid fire, a barrage of urgent facts. Nature of poisoning, number of suspects, weapons present. I answered methodically, my business training kicking in. Clear facts, specific details, actionable information. Emotion gave way to precision. Officers are en route. Estimated arrival in 20 minutes. Sir, I strongly advise you not to return to that location until we understand the risk. But the risk of inaction, I knew, was far greater than any personal danger. Margaret's photo, retrieved from my wallet, stared up at me, her eyes holding that resolute expression she wore whenever I needed to be braver than I felt. But if I don't go back, they'll destroy the evidence. They'll try this again with someone else. After disconnecting the call, I leaned forward toward the driver, the words forming with unwavering clarity. Change of plans. We're going back to Montclair. The path to justice was often paved with personal peril. Sir, you seem really upset. Maybe you should think about this. The driver's concern was genuine, a quiet echo of my own earlier doubts. This isn't a rash decision, I replied, meeting his eyes in the rearview mirror, my gaze steady, resolute. Sometimes you have to choose between being safe and doing what's right. The return journey felt profoundly different from our earlier drive. The destination was the same, but my purpose, my very soul, had shifted. Streetlights now illuminated determination, not confusion, purpose, not hurt. Each mile brought me closer to confronting the son I'd raised, the family I'd once trusted implicitly, the future I now knew I would have to rebuild from scratch. Margaret's voice seemed to whisper from the photograph in my pocket, clear as a bell. Family means telling the truth, Jonathan, even when it hurts. 20 minutes later, as we turned onto Hill Street, police cars, lights off but unmistakably official, approached from the opposite direction. The game was on. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of dread and resolve, as I realized this was truly happening. I was about to dismantle my family, piece by painful piece, to save myself and perhaps others. Wait around the corner, I told the driver, my voice clipped. This might take a while. Walking up the curved driveway, each step deliberate, heavy, felt like approaching my own execution. The weight of irreversible choices pressed down. The mansion's perfect exterior, a monument to fabricated success, concealed such calculated evil, such desperate, chilling betrayal. My hand trembled, a betraying tremor, as I reached for the doorbell. Time to face my son. The doorbell's chimes echoed through the mansion, not a welcoming sound, but a death knell. Footsteps approached quickly, too quickly for casual concern, a frantic urgency. Rick yanked the door open, his face a battleground of relief and suspicion, his well-practiced facade already cracking. "Dad, where have you been?" His smile was painted on, a brittle mask. "We were getting worried sick." "Sorry, son." I forced my voice into apologetic, weary tones, playing my part. "I needed some fresh air. Felt dizzy after all that rich food." "Dizzy?" His eyes sharpened, glinting with suspicion. "You were gone for almost half an hour. Emma thought something terrible had happened." "Time got away from me," I said, gesturing vaguely. "Beautiful neighborhood you have here." I walked further than intended, just enjoying the Montclair air. Emma appeared behind Rick, her designer dress visibly wrinkled from nervous pacing, the fabric betraying her composure. Her perfect hostess mask slipped, just for a moment, revealing the raw panic festering underneath. "Jonathan, you gave us such a scare." She reached for my arm, her fingers trembling slightly, her carefully constructed composure shattered. "Are you feeling better now?" "Much better, thank you." I allowed her to guide me back inside, noting how her grip lingered too long, too tight, a silent attempt at control. Just needed to clear my head. The foyer, once impressive, now felt smaller, oppressive, and claustrophobic. Every expensive detail, every gleaming surface reminded me of the blood money, the stolen legacy that had purchased this illusion of success. "Perhaps you had too much wine with dinner." Emma's laugh was brittle, sharp, like breaking glass. "Let's get you some water. And actually, I think I'd like to sit down again." I moved deliberately toward the dining room, each step a calculated maneuver. "If that's all right." Rick and Emma exchanged a glance, heavy, laden with meaning I was clearly supposed to miss. Their coordinated response, a hurried chorus of course, Dad, whatever you need," felt rehearsed, like actors who had momentarily forgotten their lines, then scrambled to regain their composure. The dining room had been hastily reorganized during my brief absence. Papers, scattered across the table moments ago, now vanished, nowhere to be seen. Evidence quickly hidden. Maria moved efficiently between the kitchen and dining room, her nervous energy now even more pronounced, a palpable hum of tension in the perfectly appointed room. I settled back into my chair at the head of the table, noting how Rick and Emma flanked me exactly as before, their strategic positioning a constant. The crystal glasses had been cleared, the dinner plates stacked, a meticulous erasure. But the atmosphere crackled with unspoken tension, a low hum of concealed anxiety. "I hope you don't mind," Emma said carefully, her voice strained. "But we cleaned up a bit. Didn't want to leave Maria with too much work." "Very considerate," I smiled blandly, the words a silent weapon, wondering precisely what evidence they had scrambled to hide while I was gone. Rick drummed his fingers against the mahogany table, a nervous habit from childhood that now betrayed his deep-seated anxiety. "So, Dad," he asked, his voice strained. "Feeling completely recovered? No more dizziness or confusion?" The question carried undertones I pretended not to hear, a veiled probe into my state. "Clear as a bell, son. That fresh air worked wonders." Emma leaned forward with calculated concern, her eyes sharp. "You know, rich meals can affect people differently as we get older. Perhaps next time we should plan something lighter." The implication hung heavy in the air. Next time. Next time. As if there would be one, a future built on this poisoned foundation. "I've always had a strong constitution," I replied evenly, my voice unwavering, a subtle challenge. "It takes more than good food and wine to slow me down." Maria appeared then, like a phantom, with fresh water glasses, her movements sharp and efficient, her eyes still avoiding mine. The stage was set for the final act. When she placed my glass before me, her fingers brushed the table edge in what might have been an accidental tremor, a coded message in a subtle movement. Rick checked his watch, a gesture so subtle I almost missed it, a fleeting sign of mounting pressure. Whatever timeline they were working against was growing shorter, tightening around them like a noose. "Well," he said with forced brightness, a desperate attempt at normalcy, "since you're feeling better, maybe we could continue our evening." I know Emma was looking forward to more conversation. "Absolutely." Emma's smile, dazzling, could have powered the chandelier. A blinding artificial light. "We have so much catching up to do, indeed." But something fundamental had shifted during my absence. Their desperation was showing, leaking through the widening cracks in their performance. A raw, ugly truth. I could sense the evening building toward a crescendo, a final, brutal movement. Rick stood suddenly, almost violently, and moved toward the liquor cabinet, a predator returning to his lair. "Dad, let's have one more toast before the evening ends." Rick's hands trembled, almost imperceptibly, as he measured whiskey into fresh crystal tumblers. I watched him work, my gaze unblinking, noting how he lingered over my glass, adding an extra measure of liquid that caught the light differently than the pure amber spirits. It was thicker, cloudier. "You know," I began casually, my voice steady, betraying nothing, "I want to tell you about the day you were born, Rick." His shoulders tensed slightly, a tell I remembered from his boyhood. "Dad, that's sweet, but maybe we should toast first," Rick interrupted, his voice edged with impatience. "This whiskey is too good to let it get warm." "This is important, son." I settled back in my chair, my hands folded peacefully, a picture of calm. "Your mother was in labor for 14 hours. Longest day of my life." Emma leaned forward with forced enthusiasm, her perfect smile a little too tight. "Jonathan, the whiskey will lose its flavor if we wait too long." "Can't we drink and listen at the same time?" she asked, a faint whine in her voice. "Patience, dear. Some stories can't be rushed." I watched Rick carry the glasses toward our table, my eyes fixed on mine. There it was, the slight, cloudy sediment swirling, catching the chandelier light. My heart clenched. Where was I? Oh yes, Margaret was convinced something was wrong because labor was taking so long. Rick set my glass down carefully, deliberately, ensuring I could see the generous, almost overflowing portion he'd poured. His own glass, I noted, contained significantly less, crystal clear, without any unusual particles. The stark contrast was a punch to the gut. "The doctor kept assuring us everything was normal," I continued, lifting my glass as if to examine the whiskey's rich color, my eyes seeing only the poison. "But your mother had instincts about these things. She always knew when something wasn't quite right. Always." "Fascinating," Emma interrupted, her smile growing visibly strained, a thin, brittle line. "But surely that toast is getting warm. Family stories are so much better with good whiskey." I swirled my glass gently, watching the foreign particles dance in the amber liquid, tiny, glittering death. Zetroolum. Zetroolum, according to my anonymous caller, was enough to make me compliant, suggestible, utterly vulnerable to signing away everything Margaret and I had built together. "You're absolutely right about savoring good whiskey," I agreed, bringing the glass closer to my lips, the scent of it cloying, without actually drinking. "Margaret always said patience makes everything taste better." Rick's eye twitched, a telltale sign of his growing impatience, his silent torment. "Dad, you've been talking for 10 minutes. The whiskey really is getting warm." "Time flies when you're sharing memories," I replied, savoring the slow torture. I gestured expansively with my glass, using the motion to avoid actually drinking, a subtle ballet of deception. "Did I mention how tiny you were? Just 6 pounds, but you had the strongest grip I'd ever felt." Emma stood abruptly, her composure finally shattering, and moved behind my chair, her hands settling on my shoulders with a practiced but now desperate intimacy. "Jonathan, you're such a wonderful storyteller. Why don't we toast to Rick's birth? Then you can continue." Her fingers pressed against my shoulders with increasing insistence, a silent plea, a desperate command. I could feel her desperation, raw and ugly, through her touch. The plan, their meticulously crafted deception, was falling apart, and they knew it. Your mother said you'd be stubborn from day one, I continued, my voice calm, unwavering, pretending not to notice Emma's escalating pressure. My words, a prophecy from the past, hung heavy in the air. She was right, wasn't she? Once you set your mind on something, nothing can stop you. Rick's composure cracked then, a visible fracture in his carefully built facade. Dad, please, just one sip, then tell us about Mom. The thing about stubbornness, I mused, still holding my untouched glass, its poisoned contents gleaming, is that it can be a virtue or a vice. Margaret always worried about which way you'd choose. The room fell silent, a heavy, suffocating silence, broken only by the soft, rhythmic clink of Maria washing dishes in the distant kitchen. Rick and Emma stared at me, their frustration now barely concealed, their perfect plan unraveling, minute by agonizing minute. I think, I said slowly, deliberately, meeting Rick's gaze, Margaret would be heartbroken to see what choices you've made. Rick's face went white, a sudden, stark pallor. What do you mean by that? Before I could answer, 3 sharp, decisive knocks echoed from the front door. Authoritative, unmistakable. The world outside had finally arrived. Police, open the door! The command, cold and clear, pierced the mansion's false grandeur. Rick's glass slipped from his nerveless fingers, shattering against the marble floor, a final, dramatic punctuation mark to their failed scheme. His face drained of all color, leaving him a ghastly white. Then, the metallic click of handcuffs, cutting through the dining room's stunned, awful silence like a judge's gavel, ringing the final verdict. Rick stood frozen, utterly motionless, his face the color of old parchment, a picture of shattered youth. The senior officer stepped forward with practiced authority, his presence filling the opulent room. Richard Miller, you're under arrest for attempted poisoning, conspiracy to commit fraud, and elder abuse. The officer's voice, calm and firm, carried the weight of years spent dealing with family betrayals, with the dark side of human nature. You have the right to remain silent. This is insane! Rick's voice cracked like a terrified teenager's. Officer, this is just a misunderstanding. My father is confused. Dad, please! Emma's hysteria built, a shrill, piercing shriek like a kettle reaching its boil. Tell them this is all some terrible mistake. I stood slowly, deliberately, the untouched glass of poisoned whiskey still in my hand, a silent, damning piece of evidence. The sediment swirled, tiny, guilty secrets dancing in the amber liquid. There's no mistake, I stated, my voice clear and steady, a declaration. This glass contains zetrulum. My son added it to make me sign business transfer documents. The junior officer, his face grim, accepted the glass with latex-gloved hands, holding it up to the chandelier light. The foreign particles were clearly visible, undeniable evidence of calculated, cold-blooded betrayal. Sir, attempted poisoning carries 8 to 12 years minimum sentence, the senior officer informed Rick, his voice devoid of emotion, as the handcuffs clicked into place, a sound of absolute finality. Conspiracy and elder abuse carry additional time. Rick's knees buckled slightly, as if the weight of the law had physically struck him. 12 years? Rick whimpered, his voice broken. But the loan sharks, they'll kill me if I don't pay in 11 days. Emma's face drained of all color, her eyes wide with terror. Rick, shut up. Don't say anything else. But Rick was beyond strategic thinking, beyond self-preservation, his desperation overriding all sense. Dad, you don't understand. They threatened to break my legs, then kill me. I had no choice. You had choices, I replied quietly, my voice firm, unwavering. You chose gambling over family. You chose crime over honest work. You chose to poison your own father rather than face the consequences of your addiction. The officers exchanged glances, their expressions grim. They had heard desperate justifications before, but attempted patricide for gambling debts registered as particularly disturbing, even in their jaded experience. "Emma Miller," the junior officer announced, his voice flat. "You're also under arrest as a co-conspirator." "No!" Emma's perfectly manicured fingernails clawed at the mahogany table edge, leaving faint, desperate scratches. "I didn't plan anything. Rick forced me to help. I'm a victim too." The senior officer's expression was unreadable, but his weary eyes suggested he had heard that defense countless times. "Ma'am, evidence shows you researched the victim's preferences and actively participated in the drugging plan." As they led Rick and Emma toward the front door, their perfect lives collapsing around them, Rick turned back, his eyes holding one last desperate manipulation attempt. A final, poisoned arrow. "Dad, how could you do this to your own family? Mom would be heartbroken." "Your mother valued honesty above comfort," I answered firmly, my voice unwavering, a testament to her legacy. "She would never forgive what you tried to do tonight. Never." Maria appeared from the kitchen, her professional mask finally slipping, revealing a complex mix of satisfaction and profound sadness. She had witnessed justice served, but she also understood the crushing human cost. The mansion fell silent, a heavy, echoing silence, broken only by the distant, muffled sounds of car doors slamming and engines starting, carrying my family away into the night. Blue and red lights painted the expensive walls in stark colors of consequence as the police vehicles, their sirens silent, disappeared into the night. Standing alone in the dining room, the very place where my own blood had tried to destroy me, I felt Margaret's presence like a warm, approving hand on my shoulder. She would have made the same choice. The expensive crystal, once a symbol of celebration, lay shattered on the marble floors, the poisoned whiskey spreading like spilled blood, a chilling stain on their carefully constructed illusion. Evidence of how close I'd come to losing everything Margaret and I had worked, sacrificed, and built together. My phone buzzed, a text from the senior officer. "Station processing will take 2 to 3 hours. We'll need your formal statement." Time to complete what I had started. Time to ensure that justice, cold and unyielding, was properly, irrevocably served. The personal war was over. Now, the legal battle began. The Montclair police station buzzed with the late evening activity of a city that never truly sleeps. Drunk driving arrests, the raw anguish of domestic disturbances, and now, my family's conspiracy case. Rick and Emma sat in separate holding cells, their designer clothes, once symbols of aspiration, now looking absurd, pathetic, against the stark, institutional gray walls. Through reinforced glass, I watched Rick pace his cell like a caged animal, his movements jerky, desperate. Every few minutes, he'd glance toward where I sat, giving my statement, his expression cycling between raw fury and desperate, pathetic pleading. "Mr. Miller," Detective Harrison said, setting down his coffee with deliberate, almost surgical precision, his eyes sharp. "Walk me through the Zetrulum again. How did you know what to look for?" "Anonymous tip," I replied honestly, my voice steady. "Someone called, warning me about the plan. They knew specific details about the drug and its effects. Any idea who this person might be?" I thought about Maria, her nervous during dinner, her careful positioning, observing without seeming to watch, her quiet defiance. "No idea," I said, the lie feeling less like a betrayal and more like protection. "But whoever it was, saved my life. Emma's sobs, sharp, piercing wails, echoed from the women's holding area, cutting through the station's chaos like a siren, a lament for a life that was now over. Her hysteria, a piercing siren of self-pity, carried through the thin walls.
"This is all Rick's fault! I just went along because I was scared!"
Detective Harrison raised an eyebrow, a subtle gesture that spoke volumes. Fear doesn't typically excuse conspiracy to commit elder abuse and fraud, Ms. Miller. We found the prepared legal documents in Mr. Rick's office. Power of attorney, business transfers, the whole package. The cold, hard facts of the law were unyielding. "How long will they serve?" I asked, the question feeling unreal. Attempted poisoning alone? 8 to 12 years. Add conspiracy, elder abuse, and fraud. Rick's looking at 15 to 20. Emma might get less if she cooperates, but she's still facing serious time. The numbers felt surreal, abstract, yet terrifyingly real. My son. He would spend his 40s in prison, the prime years of his life, because he couldn't accept responsibility for his gambling addiction, for his choices. The legacy I'd built for him, now a cage. The loan sharks he mentioned, Detective Harrison continued, his voice practical. We'll need details about those threats. Might help explain his desperation, though it won't excuse attempted murder. Through the reinforced glass, I could see Rick slumped on his cell's narrow bench, head in his hands, a broken figure. 20 years of my life. Raising him, teaching him right from wrong, building a legacy he could inherit. All of it was destroyed by his inability to face consequences like an adult. All for nothing. "Dad!" His voice, raw with desperation, suddenly boomed through the station as he spotted me through the glass, a caged animal's final plea. "Please, I'll pay it all back. I'll go to treatment. I'll change." The same empty promises he'd made during our last argument about money. The same pattern of manipulation that had worked when he was younger, when I was more naive, more willing to enable his destructive behavior. "Mr. Miller," Detective Harrison observed my son's outburst, a practiced, weary assessment. "He's going to keep trying to manipulate you. Standard pattern with family financial crimes." "I know," I replied, a quiet sigh escaping me. His mother always said I was too soft with him. Maybe if I had been stronger earlier. "Not your fault, sir," the detective interjected gently. "Adult children make their own choices." Emma appeared at her cell window, her perfect makeup now streaked down her cheeks like war paint. Her carefully constructed facade finally crumbled. "Jonathan, please talk to them. Tell them I was coerced. I never wanted to hurt you." Her desperation felt sickeningly familiar, the same tone Rick had used when caught in childhood lies. Neither of them, I realized with a cold certainty, accepted responsibility. Both blamed circumstances, fate, anything but their own choices. "Detective," I said, leaning forward, a new purpose crystallizing in my mind. "I need to ask you something important." I leaned forward, the decision solidifying like cold steel. "The anonymous person who warned me," I stated, "they risked everything to save a stranger. If I knew who they were, I'd want to help them." "Understood," Detective Harrison acknowledged, his gaze steady. "If they come forward, we'll make sure their cooperation is noted." The station's fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh, unforgiving shadows that revealed truth without flattery, stripping away all pretense, all illusion. My family's perfect facade had crumbled completely, exposing the desperate criminality, the raw, ugly truth underneath. 3 hours later, paperwork complete, formal statements recorded, I stood in the station lobby, a survivor emerging from the wreckage. An officer approached, offering car keys. "Ready to go home, Mr. Miller? We'll drive you back to Brooklyn." Home. It sounded both inviting and utterly alien. I pulled out my phone, staring at the number that had saved my life, a beacon in the darkness. "Actually," I said, "I need to make one call first, to thank someone who deserves to know how this ended." The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered, no longer disguised by fear, but warm with genuine concern, a true human connection. "This is Maria Gonzalez. How are you, Mr. Miller?" "Maria?" Relief, pure and overwhelming, flooded through me like warm sunlight, a balm on my ravaged soul. "You were right there the whole time. You saw everything, every calculating glance, every subtle manipulation, and still found the courage to save me." "I couldn't let them hurt you," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "You treated me with kindness, Mr. Miller, when your son and his wife treated me like furniture, an invisible part of the house." Sitting in the sterile police station lobby at nearly midnight, I found myself crying. For the first time since Margaret's funeral, tears came, not from pain, but from overwhelming gratitude for this woman's quiet, profound moral courage. A different kind of freedom. "Maria, how did you know about the Zetrulum, the documents, all of it?" 3 days ago, she began, her voice steady now. "I was cleaning Mr. Rick's office when I heard them planning. They spoke as if I wasn't human, Mr. Miller, as if I couldn't understand English, or wouldn't matter if I did." The casual cruelty of that dismissal struck me harder, in a way, than the attempted poisoning. It spoke volumes about the kind of people my son and his wife had become, devoid of basic humanity. My son had become someone who dismissed human dignity, who assigned value based on job titles and immigration status. They discussed everything in cold, calculating detail. The drug, how much to use, where to hide the papers. Miss Emma, with her perfect smile, had researched your favorite foods, your business routines, everything needed to manipulate you, to ensure your compliance. "You risked your job, Maria," I said, "possibly even deportation, to warn a stranger." "Not a stranger," her voice softened, a gentle warmth. "A good man. A good man who reminded me of my own father, someone who said please and thank you, someone who actually looked at me when speaking, acknowledging my presence." The police officer gestured that my ride was ready, a silent reminder of the hour. But this conversation, this connection, mattered more than convenience, more than going home. "Maria," I said, a decision forming, firm and clear. "I need to ask you something important. Do you have another job lined up?" "No, sir." "After tonight, I doubt I'll get references from the Millers. I own 7 restaurants in Brooklyn. I need a manager for my newest location. Someone I can trust completely. Someone with your moral character and judgment. Someone who sees the truth, not just the surface." Silence stretched across the phone connection, a moment pregnant with possibility. When Maria spoke again, her voice trembled with unshed emotion. "Mr. Miller, you don't have to." "This isn't charity, Maria," I interrupted, my voice firm. "This is earned. I need employees who do the right thing when no one's watching, when it's hard. You proved tonight that you're exactly that person. The salary would be $60,000 to start. Health benefits, profit sharing after 1 year, plus all the job training you need to advance in restaurant management. A new beginning, earned through courage." Maria's sob was audible through the phone, a raw, heartfelt sound. "Sir, I I don't know what to say. Say you'll start Monday morning, 10 a.m., at the Crown Heights location. I'll be there to personally train you. The police officer waited patiently, understanding the weight of this moment, while I completed the arrangements with Maria. Details of addresses and start dates, a promise of a new life. Address exchange, start date confirmation, promise of work, and visa assistance if needed. A foundation for a new future. When I finally hung up, I felt lighter, freer than I had in months. The weight of a painful past finally lifted. The ride back to Brooklyn passed in comfortable silence, a healing quiet. Streetlights illuminated familiar neighborhoods where honesty still mattered more than ill-gotten wealth, where people worked hard, building their lives, without expecting others to fund their mistakes or bail them out of self-made prisons. My modest house, a sanctuary of authenticity, welcomed me like an old friend. Inside, family photos still covered the refrigerator, a mosaic of a life once lived. Rick at various ages, Emma at their wedding, Margaret smiling from better, simpler times. I removed Rick's photo carefully, deliberately, not destroying it, for some memories deserved preservation, even the painful ones. But I placed it in a kitchen drawer. Some truths, some wounds, did not require daily visibility. Emma's wedding picture followed, relegated to the same drawer. Margaret's photo, however, remained on the refrigerator. Her gentle smile now seemed to approve, not just of justice served, but of new friendships, new loyalties, earned through quiet moral courage. On my calendar, in the space reserved for important appointments, I wrote, Maria, 10 a.m. Monday. Below that, a simple declaration. New beginning. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with the honest rhythm of late-night activity. Night shift workers heading home, early shift workers starting their day. People who understood that integrity could not be purchased with borrowed money, nor stolen through family manipulation. It had to be earned every single day. Margaret would have loved Maria's story. She always said the best employees were those who did the right things for the right reasons, regardless of personal cost. A true measure of character. My phone buzzed with a final text from Detective Harrison. Both suspects formally charged. Trials scheduled for August. Your testimony will be crucial. The path was long, but clear. Justice would be served. I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, finally ready to sleep peacefully. A profound, earned peace settling over me. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, but tonight, justice had been served by good people making difficult, painful choices. In my bedroom, Margaret's cologne still sat on the dresser. A silent, fragrant reminder that love means protecting people from harm, even when that harm comes from family. Especially when that harm comes from family. The hardest lesson learned, the deepest wound healed, not by forgetting, but by confronting the truth. My freedom wasn't granted, it was earned, one brave, painful choice at a time.